Hello everyone, today we'll be building the OSOYOO Model 3. This is going to be an instructional video. The handout does provide a link towards the lesson 1 installation of the hardware, so I'll leave the link to that in the section below. So first you want to remove the protective film from the chassis so that we can begin the installation of the motor. You're going to need the M310 hex screws, 2 of those, and the M3 nuts, 2 of those as well. Um, these nuts and screws are pretty small in size, so you're gonna want to make sure that you're very careful with them, not to lose them or drop them by mistake. The good thing is that the Phillips screwdriver is magnetic. It does have a magnetic tip, so that will help you with the installation. So you're gonna want to tighten as much as you can, just not that much, as you can see. Um, because adding too much torque to this will either provide a sort of damage to the chassis or the motor itself. You're also going to want to make sure that you're installing it in the right direction, as you can see. So once we have the motor installed, we're going to go ahead and move towards the installation of the universal wheel. You're going to need also the M3 hex screws for this section, but instead of the nuts, you're going to use the M320s copper pillars. These are going to be installed at the top of the universal wheel and then will be attached to the chassis using the M310 hex screws. You're going to need 2 of these. So as you can see in the video here, I will be taking them out of the bag. You want to make sure it's the right pillars because there are 2 types of pillar provided, but those pillars will be used later on in others in another lesson. So once we have the universal wheel installed under the chassis, we're going to go ahead and move on to the OSOYOO UNO board. This is going to be installed on the chassis with the M3 plastic screws, the pillars, and nuts. Now, when it comes to using these pillars and nuts, I had some trouble with the installation. I couldn't really figure out at first where it would be, I guess, screwed on correctly. As you can see, you're going to see me here struggle for a bit, but it turns out that you're going to need to attach the screws with the pillars to the chassis first so that the part falls right on top of the pillar itself. Um, right there, the one that you saw me trying to install, turns out that even if when you try mounting the pillar to it, um, you're going to notice that due to the part on the board, it's kind of hard to have the nut screws tied onto it. So I just ended up having 2 of them installed on the chassis, but it's okay because it completely held everything together perfectly fine. So there was no issue there. Yeah, you're going to see me here struggle for a bit. Had some issues figuring out this at first. So now we move on to gathering all the necessary parts to install the battery box. You're going to need the M310 screws, so you're going to need 4 of these, and M3 nuts, also 4 of these. You're also going to need the M3 Phillips screwdriver, of course, to be able to apply these screws onto the battery box to attach to the chassis. This is pretty simple process. I had no complications when it comes to this. Just dropped a few screws, but I was able to recover them. So yeah, just follow the video. You should have no problem with the installation of this. Now we move on to the plugging in the OSOYOO Motor Shield V1.0 board onto the OSOYOO UNO board. So this part falls perfectly aligned onto the OSOYOO UNO board, as you can see right here. You're just going to want to apply pressure um, very careful, not to make sure not to damage any of the components on the board. Try applying it to the edges at first, and then if you need to, just find a place on the board where you won't have to apply sensitive pressure. So now that we have applied the Motor Shield V 1.0, we move on to installing the voltage meter on the chassis. You're going to need the M3 plastic screws, 2 of these, M3 plastic pillars, 2 of these as well, and M3 plastic nuts, 2 of these as well. So this one is going to be, as you can see here, it's going to be attached right there on the corner of upper left hand corner of the motor shield. You're going to follow the same process that you will need for you needed for the Uno board. Of course, I already had the knowledge that I used for the other ones after I was able to figure it out. So this part didn't take me that long to complete. So now we move on to connecting the OSOYOO Motor Shield V1.0 with the motor. Um, this is just to make sure that, of course, the motor is in perfectly working conditions. And you will also move on to installing, to connecting the voltage meter to the motor shield. Now, for these installation, I know that it might be a little bit hard to see where I'm making these connections. So if you open the link to the lesson, if you scroll down all the way to the almost the ending of the video, you will see diagrams for the connections that should be able to help you. Uh, uh, Once you get the model kit, all these are the cables that you will need for the installation. You need to make sure that you're using the proper connections. As you can see, if not, there would be it could either cause harm to the motor itself, the board, and just complications. Now we move on to installing the wheels. As you can see, not a complicated process. You use 2 of the wheels that are given to you on the board. Um, there is an extra wheel that's just an extra wheel that provided just in case you need it, and you will need to provide a good amount of pressure just to make sure that these wheels are properly installed. And that's it for lesson 1. Thank you guys.